When it came to getting those multiple term sheets and you're seeing multiple offers on the table, you kind of mentioned what ultimately led you to your decision, but was there a strong discrepancy in terms of terms or, valuations or lick press or anything of that sort that you kind of had to sift through?
Yeah, and I think the two times that we went to market, they're very different, right? Like in 2021, we went to market and you can imagine like people are still in very much like you're giving up 20% of the round, typical kind of dilution targets for rounds type of a thing. And we were able to really protect ourselves with dilution and get a valuation that like is decidedly higher than I would think we would have gotten at that stage, because we played the tight process and we didn't jump early. Like I think we got terms that were early that were lower than the terms that we accepted later. And I don't think it had anything to do with the fund. It had to do with I think funds were trying to get the best deal for themselves and we were trying to get the best deals for ourselves. And ultimately we ended up meeting at a happy medium to get the job done the way that I think we should have gotten it done. And there was more leeway for that, right? Like I could go back and kind of say, hey, you want to hit your ownership target, maybe instead of doing $1 million, you do 1.5 and the valuation is higher. Or instead of doing 500 grand, you do $1 million, whatever. I could have those conversations. And it was just more of, I think, a founder-centric market that we got those done. I think raising in 2022, the conversation was harder. And it was more like we had a valuation in mind. We had someone to lead that kind of extension at that valuation. And it became less about trying to walk that up and more about trying to prove that valuation to other really intelligent investors that maybe didn't have the same inside look that the other investor did. So it was a lot. It was equally challenging, but for very different ways. And it was, it's always a roller coaster, but it was just, a different roller coaster.
And how many VCs do you think you kind of met with or pitched to or kind of sent your materials to over that period of time?
I mean, we're big fans of taking meetings with anyone that seems like they're interested in the business and excited about it, because the worst thing that comes out of it is oftentimes an intro to someone else or not a great conversation about someone that loves watches. A lot of the investors that are in our round or that didn't make it in our round or didn't even want to invest in us for some reason ended up being customers of ours. So that's like a fun thing that we have. Like we are selling a product and a service that a lot of people in venture tend to really like. So we have a lot of really interesting, colorful, awesome conversations with that. So we've had so many venture meetings, I would say. And when we did our first round, I remember like going back and chatting with my friends and family at the time and just being like, whoa, this sucks. Like I heard 5 no's today. Like you're burying your heart out there and you built the deck and you feel very great about it and you're doing it with your best friends and you feel so great, but then you're hearing no's and you're like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. And then I think you just get used to the reality that you're going to hear a lot of no's and you're going to hear a lot of yeses, and both are stressful. And you have to the only way that you can make sure you're getting what you want is you're just doing it all again the next day and you're having as many meetings as possible and meeting as many great people. I will say a lot of the folks that I thought wouldn't be that valuable have been the most valuable. And so I think our outlook is take the meeting, have the conversation. And, we are very heads down, but there's always extra time in the day to have a great conversation. So I would certainly think that we've had hundreds of venture meetings or investment meetings, whether it's with angels or, more institutional funds.
I'm glad you added some color to that too, because the way you kind of mentioned, it sounded like you met with a very specific amount of VCs and that, they all kind of participated. So I'm glad you added a little bit more color that, it was a little bit more of a journey and, meeting with lots and lots of different VCs. But, like you said, you're essentially selling to customers too.
Totally.
These are, so it creates a win-win across the board. And so one thing, you kind of mentioned why you did safes and how you've done safes all the way through. So you have not done a priced equity round to this point.
We have not.
So I guess kind of what's that strategy down the road? When, multiple safes getting stacked, often can hit pretty hard depending on what those terms are, if there's discounts on those terms and whatnot. Kind of what are you foreseeing in the future when it comes to doing a priced equity round and consolidating those safes?
Totally. So we've been very clean with the safes. It's just based on caps. There's been no discounts or anything applied to any of the safes. From an internal tracking perspective, we have like an internal cap table document and we treat it as if they were price rounds. So I think I've been chatting with other founders about this. I think the aversion to stacking safes is that it's easy to get lost in the sauce and not thinking about the applied dilution associated with all of those safes. And so I can't even take credit to this. Like my co-founder Chase is like an Excel wizard and has a very strict financial background and operationally is very on top of everything and is one of the smartest people I've ever met. So it's just very good at organizing this. And we're like acutely aware at any point in time where like our dilution stands. So I think it's a responsibility as a founder, but also a responsibility to your employees to just make sure you're not being flippant about that. I think the reason why we chose safes is I think if you're keeping track of them, they are really founder friendly. They are fast. They do not require a bunch of time with your lawyers. That's expensive. And they've allowed us to have someone sign a safe and then have the capital in the door like within the same week, which is just like a huge luxury. I advise, and I've consulted for many startups I know that have done recaps and really complicated, price rounds, and their employees didn't get paid out their equity for 6 months. Like it was a whole convoluted thing, right? So we've been able to preserve that as much as possible and just kind of move really fast and iterate quickly. I imagine the next round will probably be our first price round, kind of when we do more of our institutional A. But I mean, to be honest with you, if we could do it in a safe, I'd probably keep pushing safes. I just think it's optimal for founders to not necessarily always think about fundraising in concrete rounds, but in notes that can be open as long as like you're very good about tracking those notes and you're not taking on more dilution than you're aware of.